big ponderosas, giant ponderosas, old growth ponderosas.
Black oak. Yeah.
And black oaks that were, 60 feet high and stuff. It's not if there'll be a fire here, it's when and how bad it will be.
Because of global warming, because of the lack of addressing what was obviously happening, the drought, the longer hot season, the shorter rainy season, and as time went on, it's like it got scarier and scarier.
There were some big fires around us that would be in the canyons, but it would be on the ridge, on the other side of the canyon, and we could stand and watch it.
Early on.
They seem to be more frequent and intense maybe during the last 5-10 years, I guess. It was kind of scary. I remember one incident with our young son. Laurie was at work, and I was there with him. He's 33 now. He's not quite so young, but at this time he was a teenager, and we had an old RV, which we lost up there. And I says, well, let's go over the canyon, because our home was only about 75 yards from one of the big canyons.
What was going on at that
looking
time?
west? There was a fire. Dome Mill Ridge was on fire. And I said, let's walk over there and see the fire. And he said, Dad, can we pack the RV first?
So as far as the not if but when, I think there was increased diligence for us all of our neighbors and us, to just be really, clearing our land, being really careful of getting the leaves out of the gutters, doing everything we could.
We had go boxes.
Pack and ready, and just make sure that any trees that needed to come down came down. I felt like you can do all you can do, but people that want to live in a forest, it's not like, oh, you're doomed. You do what you can do to protect it, but what can you protect against drought brought on by climate change? What can you do?
I moved to Paradise and didn't really know that wildfires were a thing. My first, and having lived there, we'd always hear about fires, and you'd always hear about, the fires in Polga. Polga was such a big thing, and so, but it's so far away, and so, but just get ready, anticipate, have your things ready, have your, important stuff ready to go. So every kind of fire season, you'd think about this in the back of your mind, but it wasn't a reality for me because I didn't really understand wildfires because I had never been in one. And then in 2008, we had the first big fire experience since I had been up there. We lost several homes that year, but not as much as the campfire, but I think it was still a significant amount of homes. I don't remember if it's like 100 or 200. And so we had to evacuate a significant part of the town. I worked at the hospital, so I had to work. So I wanted to get my kids out because they didn't drive, so I had to meet my parents at the barricade and get them out, and then I went back to work at the hospital. And the fire came really close to the hospital campus, so we completely evacuated the hospital. And I remember being stuck in traffic at that time, and that was like my first real reality of what a wildfire was. And not that I even saw the fire, but there was smoke everywhere. And so it was just like I finally realized what people experienced, what their anxiety was. And every year the town would talk about, what was the worst that could happen, that if it did cross that canyon, it could overtake the town. And I guess I never really believed it until 2008 when we had that incident with that fire. And it just disrupted our lives for a few months until we kind of got back to normal. So in 2018, when we started hearing about fires again, it was a little more real for me. I was a little more prepared that time. I had definitely had, things that I knew where my important stuff was. And so that fire the night before, you would hear the winds, and they were kind of eerie at this point because now experienced it 10 years earlier, and you realize how bad it could be. And so driving and parking that morning at the hospital, you would hear the winds going through the canyon, and it's just this eerie sound, like almost like out of a movie, and you almost feel like something bad could happen at any moment. And so that morning, I called my son, and I said, as soon as we heard that there was a fire in Polga again, which is what you typically hear, I called him and I just told him, I said, there's a fire, so when you get ready to go to school, pack, I told him what to pack, where the papers were, pack it with you just in case you don't get to come back home. So sometimes they close off the town and then you can't get back in. And I said, after work, I'll meet you down in Chico. Because in my head, I thought for sure something was going to happen, and we probably were going to have to evacuate part of the town.
My niece's wedding was November 10th. We
in
left
Bend.
In Bend, Oregon. We left November 7th. We heard about the wind warnings, and of course the rain hadn't come yet. In early November, had not rained yet. So Kirk, blew out the leaves of the gutters. You do what you can do to, you get in these warnings.
Raked water.
We packed, to be gone for 5 days. And sometimes I just bring a few extra things, and you stop to think, well, I don't know what I can do. We actually thought about at one point bringing some stuff with us just in case. I don't know that we did that. But yeah, we left for Bend on November 7th. The morning of November 8th, our son, who is a tree worker, started getting calls about 7:30, 7:45 in the morning that there's a fire in a distant canyon, and that already they were evacuating the Feather River Canyon side of town from Pence. And then he started getting calls that they were evacuating the middle of town. Then we started getting calls from friends and neighbors that were trying to get out. Then we started calling them. The fire was behind our house is the next thing we heard from our neighbor, who was sitting in the park behind our house telling us about it.
And he couldn't escape. By then, the town was on fire.
It was gridlocked by 10. Yeah, he was with his 2 cats, 2 dogs in the park. His wife was in work in Chico. And the next thing we heard, there were 75 people in the park with him. A fire truck came up and said, wow, we heard there were people here. We didn't know how many there were. And they plowed from the park through the woods across to the Skyway to lead these and save every person in the park.
That morning I was scheduled to be at work at 6:30 in the morning. So I got to work and we had a meeting that morning. So we were in our meeting at about 7 o'clock. And I remember kind of halfway through the meeting was supposed to run till 7:30, but I think halfway through it or so, we got interrupted and we were told that there was a fire in Polga. And that was kind of about it. But at 8 o'clock, we would have a meeting with the town over the phone to determine kind of what the risk was and make a plan for the day in case we needed to evacuate. And so you start getting kind of anxious. Your heart rate starts kind of speeding up a little bit because especially 10 years ago, I had helped evacuate the hospital that year as well. So it does bring up those memories and you think about, wow, this could be that day again. So that's when I said I called my son at home just to let him know what was going on, and I wasn't sure how late I was going to be and when I would get home. And so by like 7, somewhere before 7:30, we realized that the fire was actually worse. And I think even at some time in there, it was actually already on campus. And I remember going to the front door of the main hospital there and opening the door, and you could see the trees on campus on the parking lot on fire. And that's when we heard overhead code black, evacuate. And so there had at that point in time been a group of people in the boardroom kind of forming a command center, making up a plan. And so we immediately, it was just like an emergency. Everybody needed to get out because the fire was so close. I know they tried to get ambulances, and I wasn't a part of that, but there wasn't that many ambulances in town, and nobody could get into town because we didn't know, but the whole town at that point is like on fire. There's just spot fires everywhere. So we just proceeded to try to get every patient to the ER because that's where we have the ambulance dock and people could get in to pick up patients. We got a few ambulances, and we had to prioritize who got an ambulance, who was, more critical to get into an ambulance. We even had patients go into private cars, deputy sheriff cars, just anybody that could transport anybody off the hill, because at that point it was like everybody just needed to get out and down the hill. I left, I think about 10 o'clock, 9:30, 10 o'clock. I finally left the hospital. At that point, every patient had been accounted for and was supposed to be en route somewhere. So I wasn't the last, but I was towards the end of the last of the people to go. I left because I remember we had made arrangements for every patient, and this deputy, as I'm going by, he looks at me and he's like, if you don't have anything else to do here, you need to get out. So I got in my car, and so did everybody else, and it was just gridlocked. Trying to get out of the parking lot, trying to get onto Pence. I don't know if you visited up there, but there's just the one way out of town from the hospital, and that's Pence Road. And there was already buildings on fire on campus at that point. And when I went to get onto Pence, you're supposed to take a left to go out of town, but there was, I can't remember if it was a deputy or a firefighter or somebody. There was somebody on the road there, or just even a civilian standing there on the road and making everybody go up Pence, which seemed crazy to me because that would be going into town towards the fire. But I followed the vehicles and I headed up Billy, or up Pence towards Billy. And I called my coworker that hadn't been able to find her keys earlier to figure out where she was, and she told me, I came down Pence and it's clear, just come down Pence. But that moment I turned around and went against traffic and went down Pence, and I had probably gotten up maybe 2 blocks up. That had taken me a long time. So when I turned around, by the time I came back to the corner of the hospital there was nobody there to block the road, so I just went down Pence. And I was doing pretty good. Everything on Pence was on fire at this point. Both sides of the hospital was on fire, but not the main building. But everything on the right-hand side was all on fire. And then all the houses, once I went a little further, all the houses on both sides were on fire. So I went down Pearson. Pearson has this really crazy turn. And everybody knows it. It's like Dead Man's Curve. It's just a really crazy turn. And as soon as I made that turn and I hit the straightaway, the road was like a parking lot. There was cars everywhere, and nobody was moving. They were just barely moving because there was just too many vehicles, and we were gridlocked. But there was a fire truck. I got to the point where I reached a fire truck, and the fire truck, I felt like it was trying to turn around, but I really didn't know what it was doing because it had kind of gone crossways in the road. But the firefighter got out, so I got out and I went to him because I figured he probably knew what we were supposed to do. So I remember looking at him and asking him, what are we doing? Do we get back in our cars or do we run for it? Because nobody's moving. And he just looked at me kind of like almost like defeated, like, I don't know what to do. So I went back into my car at that point, and everything around me is on fire, and I'm sitting in my car, and I'm trying to decide what to do. I'm trying to decide if I should call my kids, because at this point, I feel like I'm not going to make it. Like, there's no way I can get out of this, because nobody's moving. So I'm trying to figure out if I should call my kids. They're 21 and 22 now, so that was almost 3 years ago. One was in Europe and one was at home. So I was trying to decide whether to call them and kind of essentially say goodbye. And I chose not to because I was pretty scared. At that point, I was crying, and I didn't want to call them and have them remember me being scared to die or to hear me die or anything like that. So I chose not to call them. I figured they had everything they needed as far as, like, I had set up my life insurance. I had set up all my finances where they would be okay. And so I decided I would just not call them and wait it out and see what happened. I did that for a couple minutes, or it felt like an eternity, but it was probably a couple minutes. And then I just decided I wasn't going to die in my car. I was going to run and try to get out of town. And if I died running, I'd rather die trying to save myself rather than just sit and take it. So I got out of my car, grabbed a bag that I had, and I started running down the middle of the road because there was cars on both lanes going out of town. So I ran down the middle of the road, and I remember people yelling at me to get back in my car because they said it was worse to be out of my car. And I just felt like I was going faster on foot than they were because they weren't moving, and I was gaining ground while they were just sitting there. At some point, I had somebody come up from behind me and kind of grab my hand, and it turned out it was a coworker. And so we kind of stuck together for the rest of the day. And we went from that turn on Pearson, we walked all the way to almost Neal Road on Skyway, which I think is a couple miles, maybe 2 or 3 miles. And we did at one point on that road get in a vehicle just because we were kind of tired. We both had N95 masks, so that did help. We weren't breathing the smoke as much. But she wanted to turn into Edgewood Lane to go get her cat. And we were afraid to go into the fire. Edgewood Lane ended up being one of the kind of worst spots for the fire. People got trapped there, and I think several people died on that street. And we were afraid to go back into the fire, so we ended up just getting out of her car and walking. We made it to Clark Road, and at that point it was kind of clear. Things weren't burning on Clark Road. You could hear the explosions of, like, the propane tanks and stuff, but the air was a little bit better, and things weren't on fire. So we thought we had left the fire behind us. And there was law enforcement there directing traffic. And we thought about asking them which way to go, but they were kind of busy trying to direct traffic. So we just kept going. And we walked up to Skyway and headed down Skyway. And there it wasn't really on fire. There was smoke, but it wasn't on fire yet. And a minivan pulled over and picked us up, asked us if we wanted to ride. So at that point, we did get into this car, and we ended up heading down Neal Road. And we got down maybe halfway down Neal Road, and once again, it turned black and smoky and ashes, and it was like raining little bits of fire everywhere, and everything was burning. And so I definitely at that point started getting really scared again because I thought we had left the fire behind us, and now we're driving into the fire. And I was trying to figure out why we were driving into the fire instead of why they would send us that way. And we just kept driving. I mean, I didn't say anything. I didn't vocalize everything. I think I was crying, and my Heather, my friend that we ended up together, that we both worked at the hospital, she was kind of scared too, and we were both kind of crying and just trying to figure out where we were going. And we cleared eventually Neal Road and got basically down to Chico, and you could see sun again, and definitely very smoky, but you could tell you had left the fire. And it took us, I said I left the hospital at 10. I think I made it to the Walmart parking lot in Chico about 2:30 or 3 o'clock. So it was kind of a long day.
Both of our boys lived in Chico, so we moved in with our older son, which was a blessing because tons of people had nowhere to go. I mean, we know families. The biggest family I know, 9 family homes gone. And there's so many other families that they're, mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, aunts, uncles, cousins all live there. And so many people had nowhere to go. Luckily, we had family that didn't live there to begin with, so we had somewhere to go. And as far as when we first, I'll never forget, when we first went back up there, we didn't know they were going to open up. And there was like a word of mouth thing through Facebook, like
we
6 weeks after. Well, yeah. Well, yeah, okay, there's that. We'll back up to that. We happen to know tree guys, and we finally begged this one guy we know to please try to get us up there because he was going with a police escort. So we got in a few days earlier, but then that Saturday, or the Friday night before, like 6 weeks after the fire, all word of mouth on Facebook, they're going to open it up to residents only. Oh, my God, Kirk, do you remember the line of cars? Oh, my God, it was wonderful. And we made our grandkids get up and go with us. And there was just like so many cars, so many people got that word of mouth. Just residents only.
Just driving up there, I remember getting to the corner of Hence and Pearson, which is where I turned, and not recognizing anything. And I had lived up there, since 2002, so that was kind of the majority of my life was that area. And I remember getting to that stop sign and not realizing where I was. And I had driven that corner so many times leaving the hospital, so it was really familiar to me. But on that day, it didn't look anything like I remembered what paradise was like. So I didn't even realize we were coming onto the hospital. And when we came, as we drove, and I kind of got my bearings and figured out where I was, and I saw the hospital, I was just, I think, in shock. And I remember thinking I was glad my son drove because I don't think I could have driven it. And I had him pull over at the hospital because I spent so much of my time at that hospital, and just like devastated. Like and partially angry that this had to have happened. Like, why did it come to this, where this whole town is now gone? In a matter of hours, it's now just gone. It's been wiped off the face of the earth, and it's just gone. And so we kept driving, and it just was unrecognizable. I don't even know how to describe it, but like, it looked like, I would imagine, like it would look after war. It was just, there was burned trees, burned cars, and debris, and this should not have been what was left of it. And it just felt just sickening that this was the town that was home. This is where I raised my kids, and it was just like dead. It was gone. And I actually didn't lose my home. So we eventually made it to our house. And once you get up high enough into Magalia, you see that the fire hadn't reached there. And so you see this green, and you see what life should be, what it should look like. So it's just like you go through war zone, and all of a sudden it opens back up, and it was good to see, but it was also sickening to think this is what paradise should be, and now it's gone. But the neighborhood up where we lived was pretty much still intact, but it was very eerie. We didn't go back to live there again after the fire. I just couldn't drive through that town every day and drive up to our house, so we ended up selling it and moving down here to Chico. But, my youngest son, who drove that day, he had, like I said, he had been home the morning of the fire. He was due to be at Butte College for classes that morning, and I thought he had left that day. And it turns out he ended up staying at home because I guess it was blue skies up there. The wind must have been going the other direction, so they didn't have as much smoke up there. So he ended up staying in our house that entire night, without power, without communication, without anything. So I didn't hear from him until the next morning at like 7:30 in the morning. So even though I was driving back and the town was devastated and gone and destroyed, I also had the feeling like I had everything in life that I needed, which was my son, because I had originally thought when I got down to Chico and he hadn't arrived, it's midnight and he hasn't arrived, I thought I had lost him. I thought he had died in the fire. So it was like I had this weird feeling because I was excited because my son was alive and that was more important than the town. But then I'm going through the town and it's like I realized what people lost. I thought I had lost my son, but I didn't. So I was just overjoyed that my son was with me, that he had made it, So it was kind of a weird feeling.
We lived there almost 30 years, and we're old enough that we won't live anywhere that long again. So that's always going to be a piece of it. But it's almost like a young person's paradise now, that all these giant trees will take generations to grow again.
The people we know that are going up there, they're lots of families that were raised there, or their generations of families are going to go back, or like my girlfriend that was, when Dawn came over 2 nights ago, her sister rebuilt, and her close friend that was her neighbor rebuilt, so she was motivated to rebuild. I don't know, even people that were well covered by insurance and could go anywhere, they're just dedicated. Got together with a bunch of old friends from Adventist Health about 3 weeks ago up there. So many of them just committed, despite all the regulations and the problems with the rebuild, what the town's putting them through and the inspections and the costs. They're dedicated to do it. And it's not where I want to be, but the people that are up there are real positive about it. They're talking about the great views now, and to me the view is awful. It's heartbreaking.
Solar on homes, which never used to be.
Could have never have had solar before the fire. Yeah, because there was too many trees. But we're staying in Chico. It's close to paradise, and I've worked and lived here for so long. Chico's like home too.
I still have moments where I wake up and I just wish I could turn back time to November 7th, that Wednesday, but the day before the fire, and wish that they would have turned the power off and we'd still be at home. Definitely.
I feel like material things, I want to say they weren't as important because we went out without them for so long, and I see myself gathering things. Some of them were, but as far as existential kind of feeling, sense of home, I am feeling very close to this place we're in. I think partly because a lot of our paradise stuff is here, and our son moved in here for 5 months. That made it feel like home. I think that it's okay to have two homes, have a sense of a home in Maine, a sense of home here. I like an anchor. I like a place to call home. I know when I leave, we overpack. we feel like we have to take everything with us, or else, you know.
That we're spending summers in Maine.
Yeah, we spend summers in Maine, because that's where I have a little summer cabin.
That started last year.
Yeah, but a little, yeah. As far as I like that we have our stuff here from Paradise, and I like that we're creating new things, and that we have so many of our peeps around still, you know. Some of them relocated from the Ridge. Some of them have always been here.
Some in Florida.
Some have moved. Yeah, our neighbors we're really close to have moved across the country, and we've stayed in touch with. And, you know, that having them nearby was part of home, and I feel like we have this tie to them.
Still a sense of community.
Yeah. We'll always have that tie with so many of those people, our folks.
Oregon.
Yeah, all over the place.
It feels almost like a rental in a way, you know. Like I feel like I'm just here long enough until I find my home. At the same time, I have a strong community of people around me. I still have people from Paradise. Like we have a big gathering tomorrow that we're gonna get together with coworkers and friends from Paradise, and so it has made that relationship stronger. And that to me is home now instead of a place. It's those people, and so. Like you see people like the Safeway on East Avenue has a lot of Paradise workers. They used to work at the Safeway in Paradise. And so I purposely shop there because I go and see them and it feels like home, you know, because you see the clerk, oh, that's the same person that I used to buy my groceries from before.
That's the right way to downsize.
I just feel like that you can go through something horrible and have great support like we had, lots of prayers from everywhere. And for us, we landed on our feet, and you just keep going. And sometimes, whereas before I thought I needed a picture, I don't need that anymore. I have it. My memory, you know? You have it in your memory, you can see it. Sometimes you can go through the house and just see everything. We used to do that early on. We went through the whole house and
in your mind.
Saw it, everything, where it was. And as time goes on, part of that fades kind of. And then there was a period of time where we're thinking, oh, wait, was that here or was that in Paradise? You know, because it starts to blend in with your now and your then. And that still happens sometimes. It's like, wait, was that here or was that up there? Or did we find it or did we not? And then you just move on, you know. Time waits for no one. So, yeah, our family's intact. We didn't lose family. I lost some patients that couldn't get out. That was tough. I feel terrible for them. Hope it was fast. But yeah, I haven't thought about them for a while as a primary care provider, and just trying to locate all them and find them and find their families. That was then. So that's, you know, I'm kind of mixing up then with now. And that's what you do. You kind of get it. It kind of evolves like, it's all part of your life, and sometimes we used to say before the fire, and now it's like, okay, it's all part of our life, and maybe it happened before, and maybe it's been since. Yeah, it's kind of how it's unfolding. It's like that was a demarcation of life.
Moment, for sure.
Yeah, before the fire. That happened before the fire. Then after the fire, you know. But I don't hear us
It's a
saying.
different life.
I don't hear us saying that as much as we used to. Yeah.
No, it's a different life, but it's still the same life.
Different but the same.
That's clear, huh?
And we keep going up there, and some people never go up there, or they've only been up there a few times, and you don't mind going up there. We're happy to go see it. And now I feel, instead of feeling awful, except for the trees coming down, I'm still awful about that, because it's just starting to all come down. When I go up there now, and I feel happy, and I feel warm feeling to have had that. Happy memories. The second Thanksgiving after it happened, instead of saying, what are we thankful for? Everybody was afraid of, what do you miss about Paradise? What I wanted to say, what I had everybody share that Thanksgiving was, what do you like remembering the most about Paradise? And boy, it took off, didn't it, Kirk? Oh my God, everybody just opened up. It wasn't like, what do you miss, or what do you think? What do you like? What do you love remembering the most about our home? About Paradise? And the grandkids, they were on and on and on. It was great. And the kids, just their little things they loved remembering.
This week I've spent a lot of time with those that are important to me, so it feels good. But there are some days where it just kind of weighs on your heart that you've just lost that whole community, and trying to. And it seems like it should be easy, like you should be able to build community wherever you go, but I think there was something special about Paradise, and I don't know if it was because people did spend so much time outside. Like I live in this regular neighborhood now, which I love, but everybody's in their home. Like, you're just you go to work and you're in your home. I worked at Enlow now, and I see people from Feather River there, because that was my biggest community, was the hospital, because I spent so much time there. I see housekeepers there that I didn't even know their name, and we go up and hug each other, because we have this bond forever, just because we would see each other in the hallways, and I do that, like I said, same with the community. If I see somebody that I used to see at the gym or at the coffee shop every morning or whatever, and we look at each other, I'm like, I know you, and you just immediately hug because you have that bond,
I feel like we're responsible for nature. I feel like humans have done so much to damage nature, but then there's parts of nature you're not supposed to interfere with. Hard to sort out. But we've always valued nature. That hasn't changed. And I can't even think still about what happened to nature during that horrific event. We heard enough things that it was just awful to think what nature went through. I mean, before our trees were cut down, I hugged every one of them. There were probably 20 or 25 of them. I covered with soot after that. And that was like 6 months later before they were going to clean it out. I just hugged every blackened, burnt tree.
It just is a real explanation point to me that nature is important, that we do need to take care of it. We do need to nurture it and consider it in decisions that our leaders and stuff make. I think the new Green Deal is the wave of the future. Eventually, fossil fuels are going to go away. And, the sooner we kind of figure that out, the better everyone is going to be. And so...
And it's nice to see what's growing back, too.
Fire has been part of growing, for millennia, but...
What's coming back from
these
our
are
property?
Horrific, hotter, bigger things because it's so dry. Northern California used to be where a lot of the rains came from. The reservoirs are that fed the ag and Southern California. And being up here for 30 plus years, we've seen a change. It's much hotter earlier. Winter comes later. Spring comes earlier. It would be nice to keep that as an important issue in society's plans of how to keep the humans on the planet Earth, because that's about all we got as far as I know. So it's tough. We went through it, but there's so many. We're one of thousands up there, and there's so many big fires as of lately. Car fire and complex fire and other parts in Napa and Mendocino County. It's amazing. It never used to be like that.
It just happened to lose most of the town.
It was just like the worst thing that you thought could happen.
Never thought
actually did happen.
Never thought it would happen like that. Knew not if but when, but never.
We thought maybe there might be a fire in town at some point, but we basically 90% of the town was gone. And a town of 27,000 people, I think, has about 5,000 to 7,000 people now who live there. It's
I'd be surprised.
The hospital will never come back.
Never. No. Feather River's
the giant ponderosas, at least not in our lifetime, won't be back. It's a sad situation, but
it's what is.
Nature's resilient, and it'll be back. It's just going to take a generation or two,
I definitely am a big believer in nature. Like, I don't want to move to a city because of what happened. But I also know that I look around me and I think about what my exits are, So I definitely want to preserve nature. Like, I don't want it to be just taken down because it's a cause of a fire, or it could catch on fire easy. I mean, you do this from, you hear about a big earthquake on the other side of the world, and so you read it and you don't even think about it until something like this happens to you. But it's devastating. It changes your life forever, not just for that moment in time, but it changes your life forever, and you always have it with you. It never goes away. You never forget it, and you move on, but you lose a piece of yourself in that. And so to bring awareness to that it's definitely a life-changing, just because I have a house, in a different town, and people that, even moved out of state. Like, I see them on Facebook on the group chats, and how much they miss paradise, because you left at a time you were not ready to leave, in a way that you weren't wanting to leave. And so just bringing awareness to that we are still feeling it,